Given that the clock has turned over to past the 9 o'clock start time, we will get started.
He's in his room.
For those of you that don't know, although I would find that hard to imagine that there is anybody left out there that hasn't run into me before, my name's Dave Hodge, and I run Zimtu Capital. And we're the host of this Zoom with Zimtu and Aduro Energy today. And just to give you an idea of the format, Michael Patience is going to mute everybody's ability to talk. If you want to say something, all you have to do is go to the bottom left of your screen and unmute yourself, and then everybody will be able to hear you. We only do that in order to control the barking dogs, the crying babies, or the wife walking in the background not knowing that she's on TV, which can be quite entertaining, certainly a little embarrassing for the wife.
It's just far.
We'll just start off with an introduction of the two companies that have done Zoom with Zimtu calls before, and a brief introduction to an upcoming company that hopefully is going to do a Zoom call, and it'll be coming to a screen near you very soon. So Chris Grove, you were the first Zoom with Zimtu victim. Maybe you could give us a line and a half or so of what's happened since you were on the Zoom call, or Commerce was on the Zoom call before.
Thank you, Dave. It is my pleasure to address the crowd today, and it is my pleasure to listen to the presentation on Aduro. The Zoom call with Zimtu, the first one that we did was, I don't know, 2 months ago. Since that time, we closed on a financing which was oversubscribed at just over $1.2 million. We're very happy with that. And we're also very happy to have Zimtu Capital, our parent company, back again as our largest shareholder. Zimtu has continued to support us all through the 20 years developments of our two projects, both which have huge defined resources and positive economics. And it's a pleasure to be on this call today. And I think these Zimtu, Zoom with Zimtu calls are extremely positive for getting the word out on any company. And certainly we look forward to doing another one at the next appropriate time, or when Dave will allow me to. Thank you.
And the second company to do the Zoom with Zimtu call was a company that I'm a director of called Zinc 8. And Patrick Butler, that's always available to answer questions on Zinc 8. In fact, he'll probably answer a question on anything because he doesn't necessarily need to know what he's talking about in order to speak. However, having said that, Patrick, maybe you could give us a line and a half update on Zinc 8.
So Zinc 8, we've been moving our 3 projects along. We have 2 projects in New York. We're building large batteries we're essentially trying to get into the grid. One is a 1 megawatt battery we're building with our partners, the New York Power Authority, and the other one is a 1.5 megawatt battery with NYSERDA. We also have a somewhat of a pilot project here out in Surrey on a gentleman's estate who wants to turn his home into zero net emissions. And the Coles notes on the company is that we aim to be the future of renewable energy storage as well as energy storage for that matter, and that's strictly based on economics and scalability.
All right, thank you, Patrick.
There's been some text messages in German about the audio. Stefan, is the audio working?
Stefan's
Is on it?
But it's working with me. It's only with Helmut. Helmut is from Germany, and he said he cannot hear us, but he can see us.
No, he can hear for sure.
Ah, okay. There
we
are. Awesome.
Oh, now he can. Very good.
Excellent.
Yeah, Helmut actually runs a website on Zimtu, which is called Zikako in Germany, and he's a very long-term shareholder. And he was mentioning earlier to me that he would really welcome a Zoom on Zimtu alone because he has a lot of questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Howard.
Oh, yeah, great. He wants to put me on the hot seat. Is that right? Helen, is that right? Anyway, next we have James from Aries, and he'll tell you a little bit about their company and the fact that they plan on hosting a Zoom with Zimtu in the future. James?
Yeah, thanks, David. All right, everyone. I'm James Walker. I'm the CEO of Aries Mining. So the company we got at the moment is relatively new. We've got the only operating and permitted fluorspar mine in the whole of the US, and we just bought another large project in Canada too, just so we can try and maintain a monopoly on the product in North America. So at the moment we raised about $3 million, and we're just throwing equipment at the mine. We're just going to build an adit, get the mine plan, get the mining engineers in, and just create a business within the next few months, supplying industry with metallurgical and acid spar, fluorspar.
Thanks, James. And now for the main event, for the reason we're all here, I would like to introduce Ofer from Aduro Energy, and he'll take it from here and introduce his partner in crime.
Hey, Dave, who doesn't want to put you on the hot seat?
You hear me? Hello. Hi. Thank you, Dave. Thanks for arranging it, actually, and for the wording and description of us a little bit before. It's kind of interesting to hear how people perceive us. My name is Ofer. I'm the CEO of Aduro Energy already from 2012, since we founded. And
sorry, Ofer, could you speak up, please?
Okay. Can you hear me now?
It's soft.
Little better.
Okay, we'll do our best. Our goal here is really, while we are designing the presentation, we kind of thought, and already in the audience there were questions about how do you do what you do, and 350 it doesn't make sense, things like that. So we kind of envisioned some of this going forward, and we thought that with this presentation, this would be more of a background and an intro presentation. We want to walk you through our thought process and introduce the technology. And with that, we want to make sure that you kind of see that this is, if there is any item, really important item for us to take out of it, that this is a fresh, completely fresh chemistry and a fresh process that we are proposing. And because of that has huge implications. We actually look forward to share it with you. It's very exciting to be here on one hand, and it's probably the first time we're putting out a lot of it out in the public for the audience to see. For that, we just worked really hard to kind of make sure that we know that we're not drunk and that we see what we see and that we're doing it, in the right direction. One more item that is kind of important to this call is that while Dave kind of sent out this invitation and we like it very much with the vessel, we want to make sure that you guys don't exactly expect us to come with a blueprint of the vessel and just, we'll do a vessel now and description of the, I'll say the boat around it. Really, this conversation is about the technology that enable us to do things very differently. And because of that, it can be, allocated in remote areas, in city centers. It can scale up and down. And because of that, obviously, the vessel is there. This video, by the way, we created it in 2016, and where we were kind of knew that we can handle plastics as well. But we kept it quiet, and it's part of a video that is available. An audience that would like to see it, we'll send a link with the passport, and we'll just let him watch it. I'll continue basically with the necessary evil. Everything that we are disclosing here or showing here is based in good faith, was created in good faith. We have data and we can back it up. In a way, we want this conversation to become so much of a dialogue. We understand we need to lead it and to show you information, but please, we never go back from questions from hard and easy. And so if there are any, please send them through to Chris and the others, and we'll answer them. If not today, then later. It's really a good opportunity also to introduce our team. Really, when I'm thinking about the team, I have to think now about the expanded team. We have now the D5 guys working right now in the background. Craig, the CFO, Chris, Stefan, and Michael. I mean, Dave thinks really that he got a good deal, but we just expand our team multiple right now, and it's really nice to see that we are now all working together. Before we were, I guess, in the table in front of us, and now as a team, just making sure that we are getting or reaching, meeting our goals. So I'm Ofer, the founder of the company. Somewhat in 2012. Join me here today is Marc, which will present as well. I'll let him say hi in a moment. Just with the essence of time, we'll run some material through you, and then we'll let him speak. Maybe, the best to describe Marc is the brain behind whatever you see there, both technologies, all three of them. Marc and I have been working on this for the last 10 years, I guess, and of which we incorporated the company in 2012, but we did a lot of research before. Mainly because we thought, how come we are the only one who see the lights here? Is it impossible? Abe Dyke, the next guy is the business development, making sure that we are up to date with every bits of information that we have on the network, competitors, new technologies, innovation, even a little bit of our social media. Working with us for the last 5 years, as well as Dave Shuk, a proud, very noble, honored engineer, born and bred engineering in Alberta and Edmonton for years by his dad, who has, his name is on a post of one of the most respectful institute in Saskatchewan, SRC. And the relation with Dave was just as the relation with everyone else, according to the team, which we kind of like to proceed. It was some kind of a foreplay, very careful. Ofer, show me that you can do this, show me that you can do that for 4 months. And then I kind of pulled the plug and I said, Dave, just sign an NDA. We'll show you what we're capable of do. He did that and converted, and ever since just helping us to move the project forward. On your right is the guy we call Superman. Anil is our lead scientist in the lab. Basically, Anil and Marc together is, 1 + 1 create 5, not even 3. I mean, everything that Marc's imagine Anil is actually doing in the lab. Yes, no, it's just the force that makes things happen really in this environment. He's here with us for the last 5 years as well. And really this team is, when we look at the team, now the expanded team, it's very homogenized. There is everything that we're doing is on the table. 2 days ago, the CTO, Marc specifically, will run after Michael and make sure that our Facebook logo and Zimtu is different than our current logo. I mean, we just in many ways complement each other. We fight a lot, just like in any, I guess, organization. We put a lot of discussion out there, but then once there is, I guess, a decision, we're taking it forward, and each one of the team knows really that we are going to deliver. So, if you see Anil's now, I'll say something about his color of his skin. It's quite pale right now. It's not as it is because he's running around making sure that everything we're telling you right now will happen really in the lab. We thought we'll put this we're talking about ourselves, so I thought it's just a good opportunity to show you a little bit of where we are normally in the lab or working with others within the university. As we go on in this presentation, I think our goal was just to share with you some of what we're doing on one hand, but then you obviously you realize that there is several technologies out there and there is a lot of confusion. So I'd like to share with you a little bit about what happened in terms of history, so you understand it's not that we're just jumping from flower to flower and deciding to do things. There was some kind of a logical that led us to develop whatever we develop, which is quite unique. And because of that, the net result of it was really unique, distinct technologies that we are now capable to complete the patents, hopefully very, very soon, and share even more information with the audience, which we actually think you as shareholders will be proud of us doing what we're doing in that sense once we'll disclose everything. So we founded in 2012. We've been private until the LOI and still private until we complete the deal, I guess, all the time in Ontario. And we had an adjacent team, Anil and other guys in the lab at Western University in London. Basically, the history of the hydrochemolytic is coming from a concept that has, when you look at the art of it, you go back as 1930. That's the first time we saw art that is out of space. People has been working on water upgrading of heavy oil in a supercritical way. Well, basically they were using hot water to crack material. That's kind of what was the concept. Fast forward along this research, it's been understood that everything happens above supercritical, and it's not actually, we're operating water very, very unique, and they have unique properties today at current temperature, but they are very much unique properties at around the supercritical. And if you're working beneath the supercritical, you gain those properties, but you don't change the phase. And this is really meaningful to understand how this thing has evolved. And along these lines, everyone who's been researching in this kept blaming, the reactions that happen on supercritical. In other words, this technology was lying back beneath a lot of information for years and years and years. The first time, I guess, guy that came out and managed to identify that those water are activated in those temperatures in a proper way was a guy named Norbert Berkovich. He's a professor at the University of Alberta. Tragically died in 2001. His son, Brian Berkovich, tried to commercialize the technology. We actually, by the way, own those patents, not that we're doing anything with it. Brian is a shareholder and consultant in our company. But he shared the information with us, and then I shared the information with Marc. Marc, take a look at it, and he was the third guy to recognize that really everything happens below supercritical. This is crucial as we go forward. So we started playing with the water with efforts of upgrading basically bitumen. This led us to a development of our first patent and our second patent immediately after. Fast forward in 2015, we kind of knew that there are more applications into it, but we didn't have the resource to do it. We joined with an industry partner named Greenfield Global today, kind of the largest ethanol producer. We showed them what we have on the table, and they kind of direct us to research the renewable area. That led us to open a research project and to be funded and to understand better the properties of the possibility of the technology in the renewable areas, which, funny enough, led us to improve our technology in the bitumen. So lessons learned from the hydrochemolytic renewable upgrading has been moved away to the hydrochemolytic bitumen upgrading, and hence the logic. In other words, when we have done our research, it was almost upon us that we will take information from one area to the other area. And the nice part in the development of this is that we've been able to really fast forward and accelerate the research in the bitumen and bring it into really complete, nice, being ready to a showroom unit, which we will discuss later. If anyone, the hydrochemolytic bitumen really is focusing on a specific item, which is the asphaltene in the heavy oil. There's about 25% of asphaltene particles in a bitumen, and if you're dealing with the asphaltene only, and you're not dealing with the rest of the bitumen, you can see how efficient the system could be because you're solving a lot of problems. And even if you're doing those things in low temperature and without hydrogen, and all kind of elements that we will discuss later, you're getting even a higher benefit out of it. So for us, as we looked at what other people kind of are doing in the space and publishing material, it was like really a notebook to look around, and we were looking at this information and we thought, we know where they're going, but we know now what to do with it differently. Hence, we improved our IP in a significant way. To anyone that will look at, I guess, the components of asphaltene, they'll see resemblance to you know, the molecular structure of it. They'll see resemblance to the polymer. And it was obvious for us now that we could move forward and do some work on the plastic. In fact, I'll say gently that we've been researching, because of whatever we've been doing, lessons learned and the focus on the asphaltene, we've been researching about the plastics since 2012, since we started actually. I want to move forward perhaps and allow Marc maybe come in and join. Marc, can you hear me?
Yes. Yep.
Perhaps you can kind of take the lead now and explain to the audience how we're so different.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for a little bit of time. I think I have to say that when Dave and Ofer asked me to speak, I had to question what they were thinking. I'm a technical guy, and there's always a risk that I'll try to turn everybody into a chemist or an engineer, which is not the objective. My comments will be very short this morning. Quick comment, Ofer used some terminology. For example, he used the word supercritical. He was talking about supercritical water. Some of you may have heard of that. For others of you, it's a completely new term. All it is, it's another state of water that's at a higher temperature and pressure than steam. And there's a terrific amount of emphasis and interest in supercritical water because the properties of water change in that supercritical state. It's another state of water. For example, oil and water are miscible, and so the reasoning is, well, let's take something like oil, process it at supercritical conditions, and where water and oil mix together, and chemistry will happen that can't happen below the supercritical. Well, that's a nice generalization, but it turns out to not be true. The other issue, and really what I'm going to be talking about on this one slide or several slides, is perhaps more about what we're not than what we are. At the very start, James Walker commented, he's an engineer, and he said, what are you guys doing? You're mixing plastic and water and turning it into oil? And his response as a chemical engineer was, that doesn't make sense. I appreciate where he's coming from, but what I want to emphasize are two things. First, when you get into higher temperature, subcritical temperatures, so water is supercritical above 274 degrees Celsius. We do not, as a rule, with some exception, we don't operate up there. We're down below 350. It's not like black and white, that rather, even at 350 degrees C, the properties of water are very different from what we experience at room temperature. What could I say as an example? Well, everybody, I think most people know that the pH of neutral water at room temperature is 7, right? Well, it turns out at 350 degrees, the pH of water is actually 5, which to a chemist is quite acidic. I'll stop there with the chemistry lesson. I just want to emphasize that things happen, that the chemistry of water changes when we move into this higher temperature regime, but it's not excessively high. Chemolytics, what is that? It's just, it's not a common word, but it's a very good word that simply means that we're going to deconstruct or take apart molecules. And so if you're dealing with big, heavy asphaltene molecules in bitumen in Alberta, or if you're dealing with plastic, these are all very large molecules and they're intractable. And in order to do something with them, we have to take them apart, and that's what we do. Hydrochemolytics simply is we're tacking on the word water and emphasizing that we're doing chemolytic chemistry in the presence of water. I will add, as you might guess, it's not only water. There's other, I'll call it secret sauce that we apply. So it is that water is the key, but it is not alone the basis for what we do. Next slide. This is real quickly. My objective here is not to do a history lesson on all of the chemical technologies, but to simply make a general point. There's, in many ways, we can only appreciate and all of the work through the decades that engineers have done with established petrochemical techniques. They're large plants, large petrochemical plants. They have efficiencies that they achieve through their sheer size. Actually, in terms of, I saw a presentation about how, if you look at all the different processes and industries in the world, it turns out, despite the bad rap, petrochemical is among the most efficient industries in the world. And yet, at the same time, most of it is old technology. You can see on the bottom left that many of the technologies have been around for decades, 60 years or more. That doesn't mean that they're old or useless. In fact, companies and engineers and chemists keep on finding better ways to implement these technologies. So we're not saying they're bad, but we're simply saying we're different and we offer some advantages. Next slide, please. What's come into play, of course, in this century, in the 21st century, as opposed to the 20th century, where those technologies emerged, is the emphasis on sustainability and reducing environmental footprints. I will add a word that could be in this presentation but does not appear anywhere is the concept of our technology is distributable, or it can be easily, you'll see the word scalable. It's and I'll let Ofer speak to that, but mainly I want to differentiate that this is simply different. It's not monolithic. We find that the word monolithic is a nice differentiator. The traditional technologies are very large, hard to they're not downward scalable really. And instead our approach, our vision in each of the applications that Ofer will explain, we can actually operate very efficiently on relatively small scales. A quick little comment, Ofer mentioned Greenfield. The vision with Greenfield Specialty, actually it's Greenfield Global is their name now, was that we can actually flange on, bolt on at the end of an ethanol plant someplace in Saskatchewan or Iowa, a hydrothermal renewable upgrading unit to take the corn oil byproduct from ethanol production and simply have a relatively small scale diesel plant that produces diesel. So instead of being large and centralized and sort of on the large petrochemical scale, we achieve efficiencies pretty much the same regardless of the size. Next
Marc,
slide,
could I just jump in for a second?
Please.
What sort of pressures are we talking about here? Because I'm an old refinery guy, and I've kind of seen all of this before. So it's heat and pressure that basically is the root of everything.
The pressures are such that well, point of contrast, supercritical water, you may appreciate that's up at, sorry, I should know these numbers in pascals or newtons. On the PSI scale, that they're up around 3,500 for supercritical. We operate at 350 degrees at a pressure just sufficient to keep the water liquid, generally, and that means about 2,000 PSI.
Okay, so when you're talking about scale, achieving that kind of pressure does require some energy.
It's self-pressurized, Michael. So of course the pressure is generated by dint of heating up the water. The key is to maintain the pressure and not let it off gas. I'm not sure I'm answering your question, however.
We'll talk about it later.
Okay. Yeah. That's fine. Thank you for the question. What I will say is this: we saw, and there have been many efforts with respect to plastics and heavy oil upgrading, where people do use supercritical. And the one thing we did observe is that people were spending huge amounts of money generating supercritical water at high temperature and pressure, and only to find out that once they impinge the sample, it's no longer supercritical due to what engineers will appreciate as a mixing issue. So we thought, why bother spending the time and energy and capital equipment to operate at those supercritical conditions, and found that we could do as much or actually better at lower temperatures. Perhaps enough of that. I'd be glad to engage in a more technical discussion. The question that we had was, do we have something that's an alternative? The word better is contextual, of course. It's hard to, what an ethylene cracker does in Sarnia, Ontario, for example, it does very well. So by asking the question, can we do better, we're not saying they're doing a bad job. They're doing excellent work with the technology they're using. It's doing what it's designed to do. The question is, can we explore alternatives in scalability, reduce emissions, reduce the CapEx and OpEx, and still achieve some outcomes and flexibility in implementation? I think I'll stop there and turn it over to Ofer.
Yeah, the way I kind of, it's easy for me, and maybe I'm suggesting it as a theme, I guess, for the audience right now, is that we're thinking of those, when you say better, when people also are asking about, I'll say, what is out there in the market, I'm always referring to the temperature that we're working in, and to the fact that it's basically, can we create the necessary means to use hydrogen without actually using hydrogen? Either or, once you're using low temperature, think of it, if you're using low temperature, then of course you have higher yield, you less destroy things, you have less complexity, and of course if you take on this the hydrogen requirement, then your capex is actually reduced and you continue in the lower cost. So embedded in the benefit of what we are proposing, and we're aware for those questions, and Marc, feel free to answer when you need. A lot of it are embedded with the history of the refineries as they are today. And what we're proposing is just a fresh look and things, and kind of join us to see how I think we can manipulate water to create or to propose a very complete new environment and process. We use this slide really to go straight to the point. These questions, if how can we do better, and can we make money out of it, and is it profitable, or does it need a lot of money to in terms of depth of equity to expand, and other good questions that we came across. And what we decide is to present you some of the models that we've been working on, some of them by ourselves, and some of them with the help of external support. Overall, what we see, and we took some examples there in terms of the bitumen, kind of the mark for everyone agrees that in Alberta, the mark of $30 of oil is the one that is break even. You don't make money, you barely pay the cost. And under this mark of $30 per barrel, we are coming up with, while we are processing bitumen and creating a new synthetic crude, we are earning $37, and we're actually earning a little bit more dollars because we're saving and we have an example. We took a specific example on the bitumen to show you that. We build our model on the renewable with Greenfield, and they help us doing it. And again, this is models. We have to, now it's the time to actually build a showroom unit and to prove it. But we see a 25% ROI and really 90% smaller in footprint, which means now we can really think of a back end of ethanol plant and just put there a process that will meet the requirement. The fact that we are not using any hydrogen in comparison to many others is really a big ticket item for the renewable guys. And there is actually another benefit there. We can take almost any feedstock and process it without any limitations. And there are items there that leads us to produce different product, not just diesel. In that sense, in a way, I submit to you that you're more or less bringing back the economic kind of I guess, the economic capabilities back to society. So an ethanol plant could choose whether to produce diesel or whether he wants to produce different product like specialty chemicals using the same process system. So that's a big thing. Not just that it's limited. It's not limited in the feedstock that it can take. It also can produce diverse product out of it. The plastic is really beautiful out of it. You know, when you're thinking about those mass processes and you're thinking about scaling it up or scaling it down, really one item that costs a lot of money is the feedstock. You know, today plastic is free and it will continue to be free for many, many years. And that's affected the business model, you know, really strongly. That there were times there where Dave refused to do a business model for plastic because of it, because the numbers look stupid. However, we do see a high ROI and a small system that you can basically put it in an indigenous, I say remote island, I guess, in one hand, or on a vessel, or in the city center. And the nice, I guess, part in the plastics direction is that, you know, our ability, the system is chemically robust to do, you know, because of the water, because we are working with water, the system is really chemically robust. It means that we could take the direction of I guess, the circular economy if we want. And it means that we can take another direction, again, put the decision back at the hands of society, the local society, to produce diesel. Case in point, for example, again, in a remote indigenous village who's living on diesel. They will be less interested in I guess, circular economy, but in the city, near the industrial areas, I guess there'll be a far more demand for the circular economy and, you know, recovering and reusing those elements. So again, just a repeat on that. I mean, when we're looking at what can we achieve, we're working in lower temperatures and, you know, significantly different than the traditional petrochemicals, and we're working in an environment that allow us to save the hydrogen, to reduce the capital, the complexity of the system, and to really bring us into the benefit. And this is, you know, when I started and I kind of mentioned to you guys that the benefit are embedded within the process. I guess now you can see it. If we're working in low temperatures, then there's less complexity to the systems. If we are not using hydrogen, then of course there is even more, you know, our capex is low. If we are not burning and working in high temperature, that means that our yield is much better. And once you assemble all that, if we have flexibility and the system is robust, chemically robust, and you have flexibility to adapt to really a wide range of product and produce different end product, feedstock end product, then what you're getting is really a device that is very different to whatever is coming today. It has far more financial, you know, it's stronger financial. It has a stronger financial elasticity than many of the technologies that we've seen today. And that's all embedded in the benefit and the creation of the technology. Marc, do you want to comment something, you know, any points on this, or should we move forward?
Continue, yeah, I think in the interest of time.
Okay, so
well, perhaps I will comment on this one then, yeah, if you'll let me. One of the questions that may come up, so when people think of plastic, in our modern contemporary experience, especially in the cities and Western countries, Europe and North America, there's a considerable effort to collect and for the plastic and other materials for the purpose of recycling. And if you think about it, the recycling model, if you think about paper or aluminum and steel, the whole idea with those is that you take the material as is, reform it, and reuse it as in the form that it was for purposes similar to what it was originally designed. And that's the idea with plastic. But this data is from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, is very helpful. I don't intend to drag you all through it. You can go to their website and examine it. Many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with it. But on the upper left-hand corner, you see that little loop that says 2% is closed loop recycling. And that's what I refer to, where plastics 2% of this 78 million tons of plastic are recycled and reused in the form for which they were originally produced. 8% is involved with what they call cascaded recycling, where the plastic is used in a downgraded application. But on the whole, the numbers are very low. Part of the problem, if you think about it, is that even if we were extremely efficient globally, we didn't have what they call leakage, loss of plastics into the environment and trash and landfills, and if we recovered high percentages of it, we would have more plastic that can possibly be used or reapplied for what it is designed for. In other words, we have more plastic than we can possibly reuse, in short. Then the question is, well, what do we do with all of it? And one of the comments that somebody made to us, some people in the industry in Houston were telling us that everybody knows that all this plastic that they're collecting from the oceans now, they're simply bundling it up and putting it into landfills. Well, the reason is that it's very difficult to use that degraded quality. So our thought is, it's not the only thing we can do, but we could turn much of the plastic into fuels. That means a direct one-to-one displacement of crude oil that is used. And I don't want to oversimplify the capability we have. Means that if we can produce hydrocarbons, we can also actually recycle them back into the circular economy. And if you want, in principle, you could use the hydrocarbons as cracker feed and produce ethylene all over again. So mainly what we're talking about is a capability. The picture of the boat is at the front, and even this slide here. Why focus on fuels? Well, there will be other uses, but I think we have on our video that Ofer might have mentioned, if you took all the plastics and recycled them and recovered them, you would have the number of barrels would go around the world. How many times, Ofer?
It's really as suggested. Kind of we submit a suggested proposal to consider it on a mass scale. I mean, especially when you don't have to transport it, especially when you can do it in the communities, the local communities, especially when you don't need refineries in that sense, qualified. It's trainable people with some people to do collections. It just fits to the narrative of today in many ways. That's all.
Perhaps a final comment to not leave any of you with the wrong impression. We want to be very clear and not say things. Due to limits of time, we can't get into a lot of detail, but when Ofer says we're not limited on the feedstock, what he meant there, for example, was with the renewable oils, our process for the renewable upgrading and production of bio or renewable diesel, we can take diverse feedstocks. That does not mean that we're unlimited on the front end, whether it's asphaltene. We may be giving you the impression that we can upgrade asphaltenes, any plastic, or any oil. The details are important. However, as Ofer said, it's a flexible, robust, and very configurable, is the term I like to use, process that allows us to deal with variations in feed. Ultimately, the engineers among you know that the more widely you cast your net, the bigger the processing challenges. And I don't want to suggest for a minute that we're exempt from that. That said, the technology is very configurable and adaptable, as these three applications underscore.
I'll move from this slide to the other slide. This is just players. We decided to put there just to make sure that you understand, we understand the market. We know over the last 7 years, we kind of took a deep dive, and we've been working with some industry partners in the heavy oil and in the renewable oil, and we kind of learn our game. Mainly, the purpose of this slide is just to show that there are far more technologies out there that are doing something. And by all means, if you see something that you want to ask us how we're different, then send it to Chris or to me or to Marc, and we'll answer about it. Just to make sure that, from your perspective, we do understand where we are living in. We know those companies, and we know others as well that are playing in the field. I'll use a minute because we want to go through the roadmap and then give you time to ask questions to show you this is an example of how, our message is not yet complete to Alberta. We're waiting in the next 3 or 4 weeks, maybe more, Marc. You'll tell us. We'll have a complete message of how we are telling what we're saying to Alberta in that sense. We right now, Alberta doesn't really know how we're doing what we're doing, and there is a little bit of secrecy behind it. But we modeled the current crude on the left, which is WCS, and market price at $35, and accordingly, you could see that we are somewhere in the range of $4.50. In comparison to us, if we're creating a better crude, it's actually better than the WCS. It's 100% no dilution, and we're earning at that point about $12. This is just an example. Again, we have to build. Right now, the time is to demonstrate the capabilities and make sure that we're in line. I took the time at the beginning to explain what is that we are, attacking bit by bit. We started with the asphaltene, and then moved to the renewable, and then moved to the plastics. This is what we're going to do in the 12 months of roadmap. We, from the moment that we are capable, we'll take our time, and in the next 6 months, we'll deliver and build what we call a showroom unit. In this showroom unit, we'll demonstrate the capability of the bitumen. In other words, you see Anil, near the unit processing bitumen, explaining what he's capable of doing. We'll take a little bit more time to optimize the plastics, but fast forward about 3-4 months ahead, we'll demonstrate the same with the plastics for the reasons of our commitment to show and prove to the world whatever we can do. And fast forward 3 or 4 months, the system will be optimized. And we're looking at the first system as one that will earn actually money and revenue, because we'll invite industry partners. We have a first adopter program, and they will send us samples, they'll pay for it, and we'll analyze it, we'll demonstrate it. They'll come back with some kind of an understanding, not just about what's the capabilities, but how to budget it, training, maintenance, the whole thing. It's a program that will kind of roughly will host, I guess, a customer for maybe 4 to 6 or 8 weeks, in which a customer at the end of it will understand exactly what we're doing. All to say, we're starting the marketing of the technology already today. We got connected to industry partners about a year and a half ago, showed them far less than we show you right now. Got a little bit funded, and they're involved already now. Some of them are now paying. And so the way we kind of anticipate is that we will generate some revenues. It's not a whole lot, but some revenues going forward from this unit. It will ever stay. The bigger costly unit, the 36 months program, I had questions of when do you think you'll be commercial, and how would you see the models? So we're licensing based. We were not going to collect the plastics. We're going to offer the technology to either Seus of the world, or Veolia of the world, or Suncor of the world, or anyone else, Greenfield of the world. And we're revenue based. If you see already that we are now getting involved with industry partners, our goal is to be with some kind of a dealing and willing when we will build the bigger, larger unit, which we called R3. And from that point, really, we're starting entering really into the commercialization phase. The reason there is not a lot of details is because, as in marketing, we're trying to get those industry partners, the first adopter in, and they will change, I guess, the way the business plan will be. So it's kind of an adaptable. So we limit the information in that sense. I guess this is it.
Ofer, maybe at this point we could move on to the question and answer period.
Please.
I think there's been a couple of questions come through on the Zoom-sponsored messaging system. Perhaps I could introduce Chris Parr at this point. Okay. Chris Parr is the current president of Dimension 5. And eventually the amalgamated company will have Ofer in charge, but at the moment, Chris Parr is still the president of Dimension 5, and he would be happy to collect up your questions if you would prefer to email your question to Chris Parr. Chris, maybe you could flash your email address, your face.
Hi, everybody. Thanks everybody for coming. I did receive one question so far, and I have a few others that were submitted by the audience that I would like to go through. For anyone else who has questions, please email them to me at chris@dimension5.ca, and we'll do our best to address these questions on this call. However, you know, if we run out of time, we want to answer your questions, so we'll definitely follow up email promptly and answer those questions for you. Actually, a really good question just came in. The difference between...
Ofer, can you stop sharing your screen?
Yes. Stop sharing. Here you go.
Okay, yeah, that's great. So a question just came in. I think it's a really good one. The difference between a company called Cielo Waste Solutions and Aduro Energy. And so it's really a question of the difference between a pyrolysis waste energy plant and Aduro's proprietary technology that you're referring to that addresses the plastics.
Marc, do you want to take on this?
Sure. Yeah, I'd be glad to. In fact, as the front end of the patent application that I'm finalizing right now, it's necessary to go in and differentiate the various approaches and what makes us different. I'm sure you all are familiar with the way people structure patents and you tell a story and you make the case for your technology and how it's different and what the benefit is. And so in that discussion, it's on my mind. It's a good question. I think what I in my mind I do is at a very general level, I put the gasification and pyrolysis technologies into sort of one broad category, where what's happening in gasification is they're deconstructing molecules down to very low level of carbon dioxide, single, 2 and 3 atom molecules, whereas pyrolysis can be described as it's analogous, but you're breaking down the molecules by heating them up. You're rupturing bonds and then giving the molecules and the intermediates time to react and reform and create other stuff. And what they do is, and how they reform and what the products are, depend on the process conditions and as well as the feed, of course. What's the point? That's a lot of chemists' jargon. The objective is not to necessarily make something that is similar to what you start with, but to simply rearrange the atoms into what an engineer or chemist would call a higher entropy configuration. What we do is actually less ambitious than that. Let me give you an example and not spend so many words. If you take polyethylene, number 1 on your recycle, I'm sure everybody's familiar with that, the international symbol for recycling. You have number 1, and if we upgrade that, we're actually not going to make a large diversity of molecules. What we're going to do is come up with a bunch of hydrocarbons that have lower molecular weight, basically smaller, lower molecular weight versions of the large polyethylene molecule. We're not going to rupture bonds, allow them to reform, form a bunch of cyclic intermediates and feedstocks that could be useful in some cases for feedstocks for the chemical industry. We're not going to do that. We could, but our ambition is to simply reduce the molecular weight, reduce the size of the molecule, and produce a hydrocarbon. So the difference between us and Cielo is going to take a diverse feedstock. They talk about solid municipal waste or municipal solid waste, MSW, and they feed it into a high temperature system, do what's called pyrolysis. Those of you who aren't engineers, that simply means they're heating the crap out of it, and that's the technical term for that. And by saying it that way, I'm not dismissing it. It has its place in the world, but it also produces a diversity of materials, which then you have to figure out what you're going to do with that. Our approach is, frankly, gentler, chemically speaking, and the products are less complicated and they are more related to the starting materials. So I'll end by saying that's actually the same principle. It's where we started with the asphaltenes. We're not doing a huge transformation. We're simply reducing the molecular weight and deconstructing the molecules, not transforming them fundamentally, which is what Cielo is doing. I'll stop there. Anybody with, if that was not, I think for many, maybe that's too detailed. For those of you who want more information, I'd be glad to engage.
We'll be open, yeah, of course.
Marc, could I ask a quick question following up on that?
Please, yeah, Michael.
Carbon. If you're talking about asphaltenes, you're going to be producing more carbon that you don't need with the hydrocarbons. Is that correct? You're going to have a carbon surplus because the asphaltene molecules are carbon heavy and the fuel molecules are lighter in carbon.
So let's go to the oil production side of things. Let's frame things first. If you're already, I think you said, Michael, you're a refining guy, so you're thinking about ultimately the fuels that are produced at the output from the refinery. If we allow ourselves, just for present purposes, there are things we can do in refining, but let's just talk about oil production. The big problem in Alberta is that the bitumen there is API 13, 11. It's heavy, thick stuff.
8 to 12.
Then there's I guess the blended stuff is a little lighter, but as you know, it's not possible to put that in a pipeline. Something has to be done to reduce the viscosity. So our objective on the front end of the oil production is not to refine and produce nice hydrocarbons, but rather simply deconstruct the asphaltene molecules. What does that mean? I'm not trying to be evasive or cute. I just don't want to go on as I can do. If you think about the structure of an asphaltene molecule, there's two models. One is called the continental structure, and the other is an archipelago. Those are, if you don't know anything about asphaltenes, you can just imagine a large continent, a molecule that's shaped like a continent with a few little appendages, or the archipelagos. What we do, Michael, is in the case of the archipelagos, we simply break them apart into smaller molecules, reducing the viscosity, the density, making it possible to get the material in the pipeline. Yes, there is in effect some carbon exclusion. There's no doubt about that, and we can dial in just how much we want to exclude. You're right that the large carbon content, ultimately, if you don't want to use diluent and you want to go to full upgrading, well, then we are going to be doing carbon exclusion.
That's part of it, yeah.
Okay, great. So we have another question here. Can your technology complete the transformation and make a positive cash flow?
Yes, what a great question. I mean, there's often we hear about companies that needs debt or equity in order to expand. From what we see today, and according to our models, we need very little to start running around and making money out of it. And our model shows that we can expand based on cash flows. Yes.
I just saw something chat up. Somebody took the bait from me and said that if we took the example of polyethylene, and if we're going to deconstruct that into smaller molecules, this is a formidable group. It's you diverse talents, and I wasn't sure what I was getting into today, and I'm a little bit afraid. The short answer to the question is, indeed, we are going to get a distribution of hydrocarbons, of molecular weights. The key for us is to control the process so that we reduce things, maximize the yield, and find a sweet spot between deconstruction of the polyethylene and going too far so that we simply produce methane and things that aren't, there's plenty of methane in the world. So although we could be very good at producing methane, there's no reason for us to do that. We'd like to draw the line at liquid hydrocarbons. I hope that was a acceptable answer.
So a diesel-like, a DME diesel-like product is your end product for the plastics?
We could target that. We could go lighter if we wanted to. It's a I guess a kinetic or a statistical process, and so we need to progressively deconstruct the larger molecules, which means as the light ones are formed, we need to remove them from the process. You can understand what I'm getting at there.
Yeah.
So the question is, where do we stop? How far do we drive this? And we, just for purposes of discussion, we talk about diesel. That doesn't mean we can't produce a naphtha grade material.
Right, or kerosene.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, moving to the next question. So what is the path? What does the path look like to commercialization, and how long is it going to take to commercialize this technology?
That's another great question. Thank you for actually offering it. So we're taking this year, this 12 months.
Can you speak up just a little bit? You're pretty faint.
Okay, we're taking this next really 12 months to complete our work, the initial work with the, I'll call it the proof of concept of the showroom, the unit that will be used later as a marketing. We think from that point, there'll be at least a 3 years path to commercial approach. It will be built upon, basically, we'll have to decide during this year whether we are focusing on the bitumen or focusing on the plastics, and it may be, we will have the benefit of having the market maybe decide if there'll be a demand as we anticipated. Maybe that we'll look into too, but we need much more resources from that. But we'll narrow it down to one application and move forward to commercialization, so we could generate money as soon as we can. Our focus is creating revenue to the company, and so we're assessing 3 years will be the appropriate path to kind of integrate at least with one application and complete it and run it through a commercial path.
Okay. Okay, here's another question that kind of came in is, there's a lot of technology here, which is great, and the industry is a very large market, so there's a lot of opportunity, especially when you're going against these older technologies and you're coming in with something a lot more advanced. So, given the complexity of what you're doing and the technical aspect of it, how would you kind of sort of simplify the message to investors in like a short, concise sort of, under 90-second kind of message on, what you guys really do? What's the core of Aduro Energy?
Well, first of all, you don't let me explain it. You let Ofer explain it.
Yeah.
What we are proposing is really a fresh look on how to I'll say how to treat low-value hydrocarbons. Really, it should be in a lower temperature, and it should be without the means of elements like hydrogen that are necessary evil in today's market. And because we're doing it, the system, the process that we offer becomes very efficient and very scalable. And for that reason, it has a huge economic power. Imagine we no longer need to transport material backwards and forwards, gaining negative value. We can, for most of the times, we can just install it somewhere and make money out of it right off the bat.
All right, well, I'm going to take a stab at it, even though I'm the long-winded technology guy. In terms of explaining this to friends and family that I have who don't have the technology, and they're tired of hearing me go on about chemistry and the things at that level. The high-level message is the really beautiful one. You talk about what you start with and what you end up with, and the fact that we can, as we've alluded to, scale the technology so that you could install a plastic processing. Or a question came in about, for example, on the bitumen side, what's the scale of this? One of the visions originally, and it remains a vision, is the option to deploy the technology on a very small scale toward the wellhead. So instead of having a large centralized processing unit doing hundreds of thousands of barrels a day, which I suppose is possible, instead it may be more advantageous to whether you're doing plastics, renewable oils, or asphaltenes. To do it on a small scale, take stuff that is really difficult to deal with and produce something that is useful. Abe Dyke, over a year ago, created a wonderful vision of islands in the Philippines. There might be 6,000 islands that have diesel generators, and it costs them more to import the diesel fuel than it costs to actually pay for the fuel itself. Well, if they can take indigenous oils, have a very small reactor system like ours, they could actually meet their diesel needs and more than come out ahead economically by operating on a small scale. So I think that's many words, but I think case by case, plastics, renewables, and even asphaltenes, we can talk about a simple low value feed and a simple implementation to produce higher value products.
Let me answer that question more from an investment point of view. And I'd just like to point out the fact that Aduro still has a ways to go to commercialization really is where the opportunity for the investor is to make money on their investment. The eventual announcement of commercial production is going to create huge upside for the stock. We are in Dimension 5 in order to finance the beginning of this acquisition and the development of the showroom, as Ofer calls it. We are doing a small private placement, and if you're interested in that, it's certainly at a seed round level. You could contact Chris Parr or Michael Patience or virtually anybody that's on the D5 team or the Aduro Energy team, and we will try and accommodate you. I see that a question came in German. Stefan, if you're around, maybe you could tell us what that question is, because I couldn't even figure that out. And translate that into English. Could you do that for us?
Yeah, it's from Helmut, and he was asking if Aduro already has any interested parties or companies that they are willing to work with, or what target groups Aduro is looking for.
Yeah, it's the one question that, you know, what can we say and what can we not say? I'll say this in general. Imagine, so we've been rubbing shoulders with some of the biggest and largest institute in the world today. We are such in an early stage that they want to see us running with something. That the difficulty that we had for years was you can appreciate the amount of the volume of research we had to do before starting explaining these guys what we can do. And if, for example, you would agree that, you know, our message to Alberta is somewhat revolutionary, that we haven't drink that oil, and that we're actually capable of doing something that we can do, then it's upon us, first of all, to protect the IP before we come back and show things. Otherwise, you know, things will start happening in the way we don't want to. Saying all that, I'll say that we have disclosed so far the concepts to 3 major industry players. Some of them public, some of them are not. In each one where we disclose, we earn somewhat of a project. We got money for it. They agree with our concept. On the 3rd one, we didn't materialize it because of the corona. And D5 are exposed to our activities, and so they can confirm that.
I'd just like to comment there that definitely there is interest from some major big companies. One of the problems with that is at the moment we're little. So it makes it difficult to construct a deal. Not impossible, but there's clearly the interest there. It's in probably Aduro's and Dimension 5's best interest that those discussions happen when we're a little bit further along, when we're a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger. a little bit more money in the bank. We've got a ways to go on that, but that's really where the opportunity is. And the big boys are going to come to the table on this technology, and to delay that is probably in our best interest. Mind you, we would never say no.
Yeah, I want to add a comment there. Just understand that, you know, in the petrochemical industry, I'll say, this environment is very conservative. They want to know everything, and most of the times you're running against people that, you know, presumably knows everything about their market and environment. So there's a lot of education, you know, on our end, and we want to kill it by just putting the unit out there and showing it. That's one thing. The other element that is really important, I mean, those petrochemical, I'll say, producers, you know, are fairly large, and so the way it will work, you know, I think if I can give my I don't know, it's somewhat of an assessment, is that we would capture some kind of their stream on a small scale, and it will expand over the years. And the more we'll do better, the more we will expand. So every customer that we're rubbing shoulder with and showing it and presenting the technology is not about just one system. I mean, some of the operation, we're talking about processing unit that costs anywhere between, I'll say, $10 to $50 million. And some of those producers needs 50 of those. That's what at scale here.
So we're little at the moment, but we're going to get very, very big is what Ofer is saying. And that's where the real opportunity is to invest in Aduro or Dimension 5 today, is the fact that it's little at the moment, but it's going to get very, very big.
People love turtles.
When we were negotiating this deal with Ofer, which, let me tell you, is not that easy, when we were negotiating this, one of the things I was doing all the time was conferring with people in the industry and telling them the story so I could get some sort of reaction as to where this story is going. And let me tell you, I don't think I got a no on any of the companies, any of the people that I pitched to find out whether we were going to be able to make a success of this. And part of my pitch was just to catch their interest, and I would say that long after I'm gone, you'll be able to say you knew one of the guys that helped save the world's turtles. And that's because the technology is going to help clean up the ocean. And as Ofer pointed out, it might not be us who picks up that plastic. It'll be us that processes that into energy. Essentially, we'll be able to take a non-profit organization and make them profitable. That's our goal.
That's a word. That's a keeper.
Yeah.
It's back to you, Chris.
9 more kind of messages because of that. So somebody's responding.
There are a number of questions coming through that looks like it's written in German. Stefan, if you don't mind translating those ones.
Well, Helmut was asking again, what's Zimtu's position in Aduro Energy or Dimension 5, and if this position is going to increase in the near future, and how?
What is our current position? I think it's around 7 million shares. Yes, we intend on increasing that position through investment and through providing services to Dimension 5 and Aduro. We have, as part of the deal, part of the takeover, we organized an option for Zimtu and its associates in order that we can continue to maintain a substantial position. We believe in this company. We're here to sort of see it through. Next question, Stefan, where are you?
I think that might be it for the German questions. Stefan, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so I have, moving back to the technical side, and maybe we have time for one or two more questions. And the rest of the questions, just given the time right now, we will respond by email. So the technical question, how do you find or collect the plastics and inputs?
Yeah, we would license the technology to the guys who's doing it. You know, across the world, there are organizations that are you know, if they're in the collections like Veolia or Seus, you know, or GE, that you know, we will engage them. There'll be smaller organizations. I you know, recently, about a year ago, I came back from Mexico, where the government of Mexico City, for example, was interested to investigate such an operation and to fuel their buses with it. So it's basically, because we're licensing it, the model will be such that we will identify the organizations that are in charge of collecting. So we don't assume that we will do the collection.
Okay, great. I think on that note, it looks like that's probably the last of the questions. So I would like to personally thank everybody attending here today. Appreciate your time, and we're all very excited with this transaction. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to myself or any other members of the team. Thank you.
Great job, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, folks.
Thanks, folks.
All right, it's time to go. Bye, folks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.